even our own journalists at AP don't always appreciate the power of, what the robot, can do.
She means a robot that writes news stories for the Associated Press. You're listening to Robot Reporter, a podcast about how artificial intelligence is changing journalism. What is AI and how does it work? You might be surprised to learn one of the biggest news organizations in the world is using it in ways you probably would never even notice. I'm producer and host Clay Johnson, and no, I'm not a robot, but the next guy is reading a script written by one.
3M Company on Tuesday reported second quarter earnings of $1.86 billion. On a per-share basis, the St. Paul, Minnesota-based company said it had profit of $3.07 per share.
That's the voice of a local television news anchor reading a script written by a robot. Could you tell? The idea of a robot writing news copy is a little unsettling to me because I work as a journalist. I've always thought that being a journalist kept me relatively immune from being replaced by automation. It's not like the manual, repetitive type work that automation is quickly taking over. A journalist's work requires more critical thinking, the ability to take in lots of information, sort out what's relevant, and morph it into a story that people can hopefully understand, relate to, and learn from. So I've always thought my job was safe. But I don't know. Robots are already taking over some of the things journalists like me do, or did.
Earnings adjusted for non-recurring gains were $2.59 per share. The results met Wall Street expectations.
Sounds like something an Associated Press business reporter would write, doesn't it? Nope, a robot wrote that.
The Associated Press is a 170-year-old news organization that delivers the best journalism to other news organizations around the world in text, photo, and video.
That's Lisa Gibbs. She's AP's Director of Partnerships at the company's New York headquarters. She's in charge of automation in the newsroom.
Our journalists were spending an awful lot of time covering basic earnings stories of companies all over the world, and weren't as able to do the kind of high-impact, investigative, or important journalism that we wanted.
So AP looked for an answer and found one in a program called Natural Language Generation, or NLG for short. A tech company based in Durham, North Carolina, called Automated Insights developed it.
We make the world's data understandable.
That's CEO Mark Zients. He says the whole idea of the company's NLG program came from founder Robbie Allen. Allen's a huge Tar Heel basketball fan, but he saw a problem following his team.
Driving to the basket, pass manual, rejected by May. That should do it. North Carolina wins.
Gee, the game just ended. We have all the stats. Why do I have to wait till the next day to read a story about the game? Why can't somebody write a story the second the stats are out? So when he founded the company, it was actually around basketball stories and automating that process.
But Zients says Allen soon realized that kind of automation had way more application in the business world.
A business-to-business application where somebody's trying to report on business intelligence, make sense of data they have, and create reports that perhaps people would have written in the past, but they now use software.
Automated Insights clients upload data to its cloud, and the NLG software gives it back to them as an English language narrative.
Our general belief is that people are drowning in data, and they don't have enough time in the day to sort through the data and figure out what it means and what they should do about it. So if they have tools that can help them make sense of the data, tell a crisp and concise story about what the data means, they are now empowered to take action and make decisions that positively impact their business. So I think we are a tool that helps people run their businesses better versus something that replaces what they do.
One of the reasons the software can do that is because the data it's working with has already been organized into pretty specific categories.
Think about a spreadsheet that we've all seen before, where you might have a header, and so it says this data means that. So if we understand what the data means, we can use that data as an input to help write a story.
The Associated Press first used the NLG program to create stories about company earnings reports.
It wasn't a very glamorous position to write those stories because they're kind of the same thing over and over again. Here's their earnings, and here's versus expectation and versus last quarter. So using our software, they write those stories.
AP journalists created the templates for the stories, like a basic format and different scenarios, whether a company lost money, stayed the same, or earned money, and all the extremes, like big losses or big gains. The NLG program did the rest, taking those templates, plugging in the data, and writing the stories.
So we went from our human journalists writing 300 stories per quarter about company earnings. Through automation, we're producing close to 4,000 earnings stories per quarter. We're producing those stories and getting them out to readers faster, many of them in under 5 minutes, which is far faster than a human journalist could do. And, you know, the other news organizations that are getting AP journalism are getting a lot more earnings stories.
And they're not just getting earnings stories on the big public companies like Apple or Wells Fargo, the ones you always hear about. By being able to produce thousands of earnings reports instead of just hundreds, AP can cover earnings reports for companies in your own community, for your local news organizations to report. Companies you or your family or friends may work for or be invested in, and so interested in. Those are stories AP never had the time or resources to cover before, and now can, thanks to the NLG software.
So we're shining a light on stories that wouldn't be there on one hand, and on the other hand, you look at the world of journalism, there's a lot of pressure to create more and more content, more granular content, but do it more cost effectively. So we become a tool for helping to produce that granular content.
You know, now instead of having the business news reporters hunched over their computer terminals, you know, for 3 weeks every quarter, pounding out earnings stories, they're able to really think about what's the news and, you know, what are the most interesting stories we can tell about these companies.
Soon, AP was asking itself what else could it do with the NLG program.
Anything that is a quantitative story, that's where our software can help create the story.
I mean, think about the weather or think about local economic data. You could certainly imagine being able to generate stories based on that for all sorts of audiences.
Or imagine sports stories, which AP soon did. Obviously, most of them are largely based on numbers like scores and stats.
Bases are reloaded as Coates is intentionally walked. Now Micah Johnson swings away. Drive over left. Hit well. Stevenson back. He's turning around. It's to the wall. It's gone! A grand slam by Micah Johnson to the opposite field.
There's 16,000 minor league baseball games. They don't send a reporter to any of them, but they sell a story in every game, and they're all written with our software.
Here's sports reporter Mary Dunleavy reading an AP story about a minor league baseball game. Automated Insight's NLG software wrote this copy.
Jonathan Davis hit for the cycle as the New Hampshire Fisher Cats topped the Portland Sea Dogs 10-3 on Tuesday. Davis doubled in the first, homered in the second, singled in the fourth, and tripled in the sixth.
Again, AP's Lisa Gibbs.
The automation is letting us produce stories that we couldn't possibly have enough journalists to write themselves.
So should journalists like me or Mary worry about being replaced by a robot reporter?
We cut absolutely 0 jobs. Certainly that is a common fear and a common question around automation. How many jobs is that going to cost? And we have really pursued automation projects with the intent of redeploying that person's time to other things. We really have looked at it as a way to produce basic journalism more efficiently so that our journalists who are curious and skilled and great interviewers and critical thinkers, they can go do the important work that readers need, and we can allow the machine to spit out basic stories about data that really don't require a whole lot of critical skills.
You'll probably be pleased that you're not writing mundane stories, and now you can do what you trained to: real journalism, investigative journalism, qualitative reporting. We're not going to replace that.
I mean, I think right now there's a feeling that the hard thinking and the telling of very personal stories and, some of the really sophisticated work that journalists will do, certainly that will never be replaced. Automation and artificial intelligence will change a lot about the news. It will allow us to put out different versions of stories to different audiences in ways that we never could before. It will allow us to scan massive amounts of documents and data and gain insights from those that we never would have had the ability before.
But will a robot ever be able to write a more complex and nuanced story? A real story? A story filled with personal narratives, descriptions of people and places, emotions, like a human journalist can.
I'm not going to say it won't happen, but we're a long, long way from that.
So what's next for AP in the use of natural language generation?
We're working on a project right now to test whether a robot can summarize AP stories. Create a 2 to 3 sentence summary, and that could be useful to some readers who want digests of the news. And we're also exploring how we can use machine learning to help our reporters cover their beats better and figure out how to find trends and break news by scouring massive amounts of data that they would never have the time to do on their own.
Right now, AP is running an editor's note at the bottom of every story a robot writes, letting its readers know that it did, that it wasn't written by a human. That will likely fade away, just like AP's old disclaimer on digital photos it published many years ago, telling readers the photos weren't actually film photographs. That's just part of the evolution of technology. So in the future, if you read an AP story or hear or see a news announcer read it like this one, you may not know whether it was written by a human or by a robot.
3M expects full-year earnings in the range of $10.20 to $10.45 per share.
Can a robot replace you at work? A study from the North Carolina State Institute for Emerging Issues says there are about 40 professions that are vulnerable.
It would take double the people with the older machines to do what this one machine here does.
The documentary Connecting the Bots looks deeply into how automation is changing the workplace. We'll take you into universities and community colleges, teaching students the skills they'll need for the jobs of today and tomorrow. And we'll go inside companies that use robots to make everyday goods and the companies that make those robots.
This is what I would consider a first-generation collaborative robot.
It's a fascinating look at the future of work. You can stream Connecting the Bots for free at WRALDocumentary.com. This podcast, Robot Reporter, was produced by Capital Broadcasting Company, edited by Francis Lay, with an assist from Jay Jennings. I'm non-robot journalist and documentary producer Clay Johnson. If you like this podcast, we'd appreciate you sharing it with your friends. Thanks for listening.